Hello, everybody. So, you came out to hear some porn tonight? Oral porn. It's a riot. I was talking to my dad, Willie Birch, who there's a character in the book named Willie, and my dad was like, I was there after this book came out. That may or may not be true. And my mother was Steve Cannon's student. And so actually Steve Cannon is responsible in many ways for me being here in front of you, because he invited my mother to go read with Baraka, Esther Louise. And my dad went to this reading, and he looked at my mother, and he said, "I want that one." He didn't realize she already had 2 children, and he didn't know that she would have 5 children by the end. So my dad and I were talking about how it was a little bit like Joyce, but I was also thinking it was a lot like Confederacy of Dunces, with New Orleans being such a central character in the book. Some of you may know my family's from New Orleans. It's like the Kama Sutra. Dip signaled for a left turn and waited until the lane was clear, and Annette put his plaything back in his pants. He turned, barely missing 2 cats, one white and the other black, being chased by a toothless hound dog. Annette zipped him up, and Hendrick's child had her last fling. The announcer's voice was running down the details concerning the traffic accident. To Annette and Dip, it sounded like something that had happened in another space age, possibly on another planet. Before you could think Bozo and Dolly, Dip had pulled the car in front of the house, parked. They both were out. A yellow pale moon hung over the southern sky, showering its light down on the gray cemetery, the trees, the house, and Annette and Dip walking hand in hand towards the gate. "This is a nutty place," Annette smiled, remembering the first time she'd been there and the treatment she'd received. They don't ask any questions. They just give you the key if you got the bread. Nutty place. The words stuck in Dip's mind like bubble gum on the brain and slowly worked their way down to his Jones. And only 14, Dip thought. How in the hell did she know so much? But he let the thought slide as the root meaning of the words nutty place got down. Annette released his hand, opening the gate, and led the way down the gravel path. Seashells crunching underneath their feet, they stood at the side entrance. A bare light bulb glared from the porch. Gnats swarmed around like space capsules around Earth. Annette recognized the couple seated at the table in the rear of the courtyard. She waved. The girl giggled, then waved back. The guy nodded. Moss from the weeping willow touched the girl's shoulders, giving them a sinister appearance in the shadows. Dip never noticed. "You go in and sign the register. I'll wait here." Dip was confused. He was busted, and for some strange reason he assumed it was free. Do what? A wry grin crossed Annette's lips. She hesitated, then whispered, "You ain't got any money?" Looking up into his eyes, Annette rubbed her cunt against his thigh and fingered his nutty place while Dip patted her soft behind. "We ain't gotta go in. I mean, we can do what we gotta do in my machine. Dig? Annette smiled, tiptoed, and kissed him on the lips. He was so tall and silly, all at the same time, and 20 years old too. Wow! She reached in her bag and slipped him her allowance, 2 crumpled dollar bills. Sign the register. I'll wait, okay? Dick looked down at her, puzzled for a moment. He flattened out the singles, then slipped them in his pocket. He lit up a cigarette, then trudged up the wooden steps. Annette took a seat near the couple under the weeping willow, brushing the moss back off her back. The girl's name was Mary. Her date's name was Hank. Oh, saw Miss Perkins and Fess Williams sneaking out just for y'all arrived, Mary giggled, then twitched. Hank nodded and turned in his sleep. Annette laughed. I heard they've been making it together for quite some time, like since the beginning of the semester. They both laughed, then swapped lies about who was screwing who back at the school, brought it down home, talking about people in the neighborhood, grinning all the time, took it out to cover presidents, state heads, nuts, and sports figures too. Even went so far to talk about the people on TV and a whoop of movie stars making up tales as they went along. You know Miss Inez at the Gumbo House? The bitch threw me out. Child, you don't say. Yeah, told me to never come back. Then Annette took it from the top and ran the whole story. Meanwhile, Dick was having his troubles in the kitchen. A long, lanky blonde, big, wide hips and breasts the size of honeydew melons, coffee-colored skin, and muddy brown eyes explained, sign you and your wife's name in the book. A blue-lined notebook with names scribbled in pencil lay open on the enamel table. Dip signed the name, but had to think about the wife thing for a second. Your girlfriend, fool. I know you didn't come here by yourself or with some man. Sign her name. She poured herself another shot from the pint of Old Crow on the table, and be sure you put down how long you're gonna be here. About 15 minutes, Dip blurted, carefully writing Annette's name underneath his own. The woman let out a crackling laugh. 15 minutes? She guffawed again, louder this time, covering her mouth with her hand. Lord, child, you can't be that fast, lest your name be Speedo. Put down an hour. That's the shortest we allow. She leaned her way back from the waist, putting her hands on her hips, and laughed again. Here, let me see what you done wrote in this here book. The woman leaned over, resting her bony fingers on the table, squinting her eyes. Dip was standing over her, looking uncomfortably at her gray hair streaked with blackening and smelling tobacco juice blended with bourbon emanating from her. She waited, and Annette had said this was a nutty place. In more ways than one, he thought to himself. She made him scratch out Annette's name and wrote Mr. and Mrs. before his name. The police see that? The way you had it there? We're all going to jail. Feeling low and square, bashful as a faggot at a bulldagger's ball, Dip pulled his bills out of his pocket and threw them on the table. That's what you told me to write. Her name beneath mine. The woman laughed again, shaking her head. Another woman walked into the kitchen, big, burly, and fat, and just as black. What's going on, B? The first woman was still crackling, holding one hand over her mouth, the other pointing at Dip. Dip glanced at the two women, down at the register, then headed out the door. The first woman began, through peals of laughter, to explain to the other what had gone down. Dick mumbled to himself as he hit the screen door, "But I still say it's only going to take 15 minutes." A couple came out of the side door as he was going down the steps, the guy straightening out his stingy brim, the girl her afro blue wig and purple